Thank you. I called.
Welcome, everybody. It's February 3rd and February already, and we're doing Bible study on what does the Bible have to say about discipleship and evangelism. So if you are listening to the sermon last week, this scripture might have looked a little familiar for the Prince of Peace folk. But how do Christians look upon evangelism? And how are we supposed to evangelize if we believe there is no force in religion? So, Vicki, that was your sermon, then followed up by evangelize. So, how are we supposed to do that anyway? Who gave you any kind of introduction to how to be a follower of Jesus? Does anybody have a story about how they came to be a Christian or a follower of Jesus? I guess you could learn it on your own. Did anybody influence you to be a follower of Jesus?
I think it's just the models of our seniors, people that we.
You hung around with other Christians?
Yeah.
When you grew up in a family where church on Sunday morning and church on Sunday evening and all the events take priority.
So no more.
You get saturated with it.
Right. No excuses of not going, right?
Right. Yeah. You never thought of skipping church.
Yeah. If Lyle were here, he might say that his mother sent him down the street to the church down the sidewalk, and so he went by himself, I think, as a youngster. Does that sound right? Does anybody remember that?
Yeah.
I don't know that you could do that today. You might run into some trouble.
Well, I certainly grew up going to church because I went to Catholic school and Catholic, we went to Catholic Mass every Sunday. Had the same thing after lunch, our brunch after church, it's plenty of kind of what you're describing, what you have in terms of the practices, I guess. But for me, a friend of mine kind of badgered me in some ways, but got me to read the Bible because I'd never read it. I don't think it's a truism to say Catholics don't read the Bible, but they don't. It's certainly not emphasized like Protestants, as I've learned it in the same way. So when I started to just read the Bible for myself, that began a process for getting me where I am.
So you had took some of that upon yourself to figure out what this was all about.
Yeah, and it's certainly. When I'm looking at this passage, it doesn't give us a lot of detail. It just gives us this sort of. There's no background. Although it is through a friend, right? Philip, like Andrew and Peter, Philip found Nathaniel, so on and so forth. So I guess you could say partly it was relationships. But for me, part of it was the first book I pretty much read was the book of Revelation, which I don't think most people would ever say, go read the book of Revelation, But some of it had to do with sort of there was a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. And that was
You're scratching on the computer and it's making sounds.
Late Great Planet Earth, which was about those kinds of issues. And, people were talking about the end of the world kinds of stuff in some new ways in that time period. So that kind of got me interested, and that's what I read.
Yeah, I don't. Um, yeah, the Book of Revelation is hard to understand, even if you've been a Christian for all your life.
Well, I'm with Larry. I'm a preacher's kid, and everything was church. There was hardly anything that wasn't church in my world. There's just no second kinds of thoughts. And then when our families got together at Christmas or Thanksgiving, it was still church because they were all preachers. So they're all talking about their churches. So I got churches, but the consciousness, it's like a fish in the water, or can't see the forest for the trees. So I have no story of real distinctiveness about it. It just always is kind of thing.
No,
Yeah.
no one size fits all, is there? So, a lot of churches emphasize. I was. You have to have a conversion story, and you have to talk about how bad of sinner you were and how many things you did wrong, and that's true for a lot of people. But it's not true for. That's not the path that everybody follows. So, it doesn't necessarily make it, it may be not dramatic, but it might be that but that it made something spoke to you somehow. So Kathy, you kind of are newer into the family of Christianity, I think, is that right?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition. My family did not go to church. Did we believe? Yes, but they were not church goers. The children, if we wanted to go to Sunday school, we always went to Sunday school. But I've been going to church off and on since I'm in my 20s, but different churches, and then decided I wanted to reinvest again.
Yeah. So you took yourself to Sunday school as a kid if you wanted to, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think we'll ever see those days where children would be allowed to walk on their own.
But we didn't. I lived out in the country. Howard knows that Appleton Church is where I used to go to Sunday school.
Yeah.
No, we weren't walking around, but my mother would take us and pick us up. But
Yeah, that's a cool thing that churches do. Without those Sunday school teachers, I don't know where I would be. Who taught you some of those basic beliefs that who taught you the Lord's Prayer? No idea.
Teacher, right?
Yeah, somebody did. So I think if we didn't take it on ourselves to do messy church or do Sunday school, kids wouldn't learn about any of those Bible stories that we learned. There's nobody teaching Bible stories that I know of, unless they're in a church somewhere. I guess there's Veggie Tales, the TV version.
Just below the passage there, the first sentence says something about being relational, that discipleship and evangelism are relational. So, which is what I think that passage is about. They have those relationships, and then they start to, there's a lot more that's going on in terms of talking to each other, and whether it's, you befriend somebody and they take you, or your kids, or that happens to you. I think there's kind of this we tell these stories about conversion, and it's almost like if it's, the more dramatic, the better. But I don't really see that in the Bible so much. I think that's more of a socialization kind of thing that certain groups in Christianity kind of go with. And I'm not sure that it could be that way, but I don't think that's the only way, or it has to be that way.
Well, there's Augustus, who's, has a great conversion story. He was a playboy, but that's not the Bible story. But Paul's a pretty dramatic conversion story. But the disciples were kind of like thick in the head. They didn't catch on right away as to what was going on.
Yeah,
So
I wonder, Augustine, it does have this moment, but he sure has a long time where people are kind of sharing with him, and he's just doing his own thing. In other words, there maybe Paul and I don't know about this. Paul and Augustine are so thick-headed, they keep telling them, and finally, God has to hit them over the head before they finally give in. That's just, I don't know. I'm not going to bet the farm on that, but I wonder if that's not part of it.
well, I certainly think human beings are capable of being thick-headed.
Sure, and and Paul, he was definitely, even from the New Testament, Paul says, I was basically there when we were basically putting Christians to death. It would take something maybe dramatic to turn somebody like that. I don't know.
But I would agree. I grew up in a culture where it was really important. You were supposed to know a day, a date, and a time. You were supposed to have a story to tell about when you became a Christian. That was, I think that's part of the I want to say, and anybody can say whatever they wish, but in my mind, it's the evangelical mindset. It's what the evangelistic, it's what a good Southern Baptist is gonna do, and I never felt like I could do that. So I really like the quote here that you have showing on Bernard Eller. Good evangelism is come see Jesus, meet Jesus, know Jesus, and I don't know that I've ever thought about it like that, but it's what makes the most sense, and it's really how I see Prince of Peace operating today, and it meets with the who are you and why are you doing these things you're doing, and why are you saying the things you're saying, and why are you in the world the way that you're in the world. It is not going to probably grow you the biggest church. It you need I can't think of the guy's name. He's got advertisements now, on TV, and it's the big mega church, and it's the big microphone and the big stage and the big bands and something that's a whole different kind of way of worship. But I don't. That probably gets you the most numbers, but I don't know. I'll stop. I can't say anymore.
Well, what you're describing is what I would call sociological stuff, and again, that could be important. I actually did go to a service, and they gave me a card, and I still know the date of that service, where I made a commitment, June 24th, 1973. But it's not really important for me in my story. I can say that, but I see that as kind of like, oh yeah, that was just what happened, and yeah, it was important in some ways, but sure there's a lot of other things that are really important about quote unquote conversion. So I generally don't talk about that, because I don't think that one day doesn't really describe what happened to me or who I am.
so it's relationships that are on, that keep continuing on. That, I mean, I've always heard you don't ever get to graduate if you're a Christian. You don't ever get to retire if you're a Christian. You keep, you're still in Sunday school or Bible study the rest of your life. Sorry, nobody can leave. So have you seen this come and see approach? Have you experienced it? I think Dave's saying he's had it, both approaches, which is, commit your life and make a big splash, and you've had the come and see approach. It's like, hey, this is what we're doing over here. Why don't you check us out? We're having climate change events, or we're having Scott play music, gospel, bluegrass. Oh no, not bluegrass, but what's his
Jazz.
What is it?
Jazz.
Blues.
The blues.
Blues.
Scott.
Jazz and blues. Yeah. So check us out. This is what we're talking. This is what we're thinking will be a way to find Jesus Christ in the midst of all these other things that might be of interest to you. Have you been the recipient of someone asking you, "Are you saved?" and coming up to you and asking you, "Are you saved?"
I personally, I don't like the hard approach. I like, Dave's, I think, comment is wonderful. It's a one day. I like the Church of the Brethren, come and see. I mean, the other is, to me, a turnoff. When I went to churches and they had the hard sell, and it felt like, I'm like, I have my own beliefs. I don't need you to put them down my throat. That's my personal opinion.
You have to believe this way or else, right?
Right.
Well, and I've had conversations with Orthodox Christians, the Russian, Greek, that tradition that comes from the East, and in turn, which is a really rich theological tradition, and one of their time-honored definitions of being saved is, if someone asks them, "Are you saved?" It's very common for them to say, "I am in the process of being saved," and which is not to say you hadn't made a commitment, but it's sort of, it combines, I guess, conversion and discipleship. I always kind of thought that was a pretty interesting way to look at it, and the Orthodox have a lot of interesting ways of looking at things.
Yeah, I grew up with folks thinking that was the way you were supposed to be saved, was you're supposed to be able to say yes to the day and the time and the whatever. And my evangelistic services, you'd have a week, you'd invite a church would invite a special speaker to come in for a weekend or 3 days or a whole week of evangelistic services, and you'd have church every night, and there'd always be some kind of an altar call. And that altar call was also a really important dynamic. And all of that, I agree with Kathy. It felt coercive, and it felt like, arm twisting that I wasn't gonna, I just did not buy into. So, yeah, so evangelism is I've kind of grown up with it. For me personally, it's kind of, it's like it's a dirty word. It's like, bleh. Because of that, my perception of and experience of the coercive element to it. So, yeah, what's the classic response to, are you saved? It's, well, go ask my neighbors. and they'll tell you whether I've been saved or not. Excuse me, I have a phone call.
Yeah. So Donna and Larry, did you
Hello?
have evangelism services as in your years growing up?
Yeah.
Oops, you're muted, or we can't hear you. There we go.
Before I was a part of the Church of the Brethren, as a young child, I remember going to evangelistic services. Then after becoming a part of the Church of the Brethren, I think we had special services, particularly at Easter time. I'm not sure they were ones that always had an altar call, but you always knew that if you wanted to be baptized or be a part of the church, you were welcome. And that's, as you know, Dean Ferringer from your church was our pastor as a youth. And so that's the way I came to know Church of the Brethren mostly.
Aha. Yeah,
I,
there's.
re-
Go ahead.
I recall that at Regional Youth Conference in McPherson, they would ask the youth to make a commitment to the one that I remember very clearly was commit to going into volunteer service for 1 year or 2 years. And it was kind of an altar call, but I remember I was challenged to do that. And I think it was as a result of growing in that direction that I ended up going to BVS and ended up in Nigeria.
Right. Wow. So a life changer for many.
Right.
There are still churches in the Church of the Brethren that will have evangelical services. Oh, we lost Larry and Donna. Oh. And Howard, I don't know. Did your father? He was a pastor. Was that something big? And
I can remember back in the 40s, yeah, that was true. We had evangelistic services. And I know my dad was called out to go to other churches for a week to do that. And we had people come to our church and do the same. But, and they always stayed at our house. So, I was kind of immersed with these people. But I never, and my parents or any of these people never put pressure on me one way or another in terms of what direction to go. We may just kind of like, it just seemed like it's logical. And I would, talk to people that would come by that I know. Who was the guy who was Heifer Project, guy who started Heifer Project?
Nan West.
Yeah, he visited our home several times. And I remember visiting with him, but I was just kind of impressed with what was doing and what the commitment there. But, and it was just kind of like, this is something that works. This is something that's good. This is what God would, want for his people. And my grandfather, my mother's father, came from Denmark when he was 16 years old on a ship. I worked his way over on his own. And I don't know what his history was over there. I know the Brethren were in Denmark, and I don't know whether he had any association with them or not. But at any rate, on reading his story was, he got to read, and this kind of impressed me as I was early elementary school type thing. And he says that he read the Bible and he could see, that, war was not the thing to do. Do not kill. And in Denmark, you were required to do 2 years of service to armed services when you got to be 18 or whatever it was. And he had read the Bible, and on his own, he decided this was not the thing to do. This was not or commanded not to kill, and this was not a way to live. And so he decided to make his way to America, and he worked his way over in ship, and
Wow.
ended up working. Yeah, and he ended up working on a farm with somebody in southwestern Iowa, I guess it was. And I don't know how all the story about how he got there, but at any rate, it was some I don't know if they were Brethren or Mennonite or whatever, but they had similar philosophical or theological feelings. But anyhow, I saw these kinds of things happen, and then I worked in a grocery store when I was in junior high, and I watched things that were happening, and we had a young man that was in our church, and he had an alcohol problem, and he was a wonderful tenor, and my dad worked with him some. They used to sing duets in church and things like this, but every once in a while I get a call where he was on a binge and out. Well, one of my jobs at the grocery store was I'd go around, I got to take the pickup that they had, little old like 1939 Chevrolet half-ton pickup, and go around to all the bars in town. We had 5 churches and 5 bars in the little town that we were in. And I go around, pick up boxes, for boxing groceries at go in the back doors, down the alleys, and I get a chance to peek in and see what was going on. And after him dealing with this gentleman who was an alcoholic, I could see some of this stuff that was going on and didn't work, and some of the tragic things that happened because of it. And these are just kinds of things that made an impression on me, that this is not the way I want to spend my life.
Life lessons from the ground up. Nobody had to force it down your throat, huh?
Yeah, no, and I never had anyone do that. Try to. My grandfather came over from Denmark. He would tell these stories, but he would probably is a little bit more forceful that way, but not significantly. But so
yeah, so
I just kind of come up with the idea that what God was all about was what was good for humanity, and so.
And does that work? Does that work with people today? I wonder. No force in religion. Does that work for people today?
Well, everybody's story is going to be kind of different, probably. The phrase I like in this passage is "come and see." Come and see, which is not coercive, but it is. Hey, maybe you need to look at something that's going on here, and I had to look this up. I didn't know where this passage was, but it's later on, John 6, and it's chapter 6, verse 66 says, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. So Jesus said to the 12, do you want to go away? And Simon Peter said, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Well, I like, to whom shall we go? I mean, there have been times I've felt that way. I don't know anywhere else that I can go or want to go. I think some of I've never been ordained because it's partly I've had these kinds of like questions. I mean, people sometimes are surprised, oh, you should be ordained. Yeah, I guess under some people's understandings, but I was kind of like, I didn't. That's a long story, but I always resonated with that passage. To who else would I go? And I've never found anything else that made as much sense, even when I was really sort of like done with church or upset with certain ways that church was done. Jesus was the one to follow.
Right. So we don't all have the same Jesus experience, and we have you can go down the street in any town and find a variety of ways to worship. And I think personality needs different kind of churches in order to feed people's to feed their hunger. And so if I'm in a Pentecostal church, I'm sure that that would be one way it would feed people's souls. It's not right or wrong, but it's just not going to be the one that feeds my soul particularly. So we have this this sermon I preached was on that says Christians have 3 jobs: come, grow, and go. And do you think we need to have people who are only good at one of these things, or can we be attracted to all of them, or are we attracted to do any of these things? Someone had to invite us to come, and then we had somebody who helped us grow, and then Larry had someone who helped him go. He was invited to go to Brethren Volunteer Service, or you could be going to help your neighbor across the street. Like Kathy got delivered birthday flowers to Ellen on her 93rd birthday. Was that was someone told you, someone made you do that, Kathy, or is that your own idea? You're muted. Kathy's muted.
I think come, grow, and go is you can be wherever you're at in your life. You might be in one, you might be in all. At one stage, you might be here. The next stage, you might go back. I think that's how you evolve with your faith.
Yeah. Yeah, if we didn't have any Sunday school, we wouldn't have any grow. You know, that to me is part of our church's mission. Someone has to pass on these stories, or they would die of a lack of someone to share them.
What reminds me with Ellen, when we were at church last week, there on the counter was a note to you, Gail, asking you to deliver these in a card. And I don't know who it was from, but a birthday card for Ellen, and two candy bars, 2 of those chocolate, dark chocolate candy bars. And it says, Gail, please take this to Ellen when you go. Okay. And so she had asked us to stop by, and so we stopped by, and so we were on our way. We did take those over to her. And so somebody asked you, well, what happened to those candy bars that left for Ellen? Did you get them over there? Well, we took them.
Did you eat them?
Since we were yeah. And we heard all about Kathy's cake and a couple other cakes that she got, and so on and so forth. It was really good.
Right. So one of the things that I think we have to have is for somebody to come to. And so it's very important to me that we have small groups for people to have something to come to. So maybe it was cooking class that got people to come in the door for the first time. Or maybe it was the live music that got people to come the first time. But if there's, Bible study attracts some, it doesn't obviously attract everybody, or screen would be full. So that's why I think you have to have a variety of things. One of the things I like a lot is Anne Lamott's story, and this was a short version of her conversion. Someone want to read this? Anne Lamott came to Jesus. Read that passage for us out loud. Dave, you really like this passage. You better read it.
Anne Lamott came to Jesus just as she was, a foul-mouthed, bulimic, alcoholic drug addict. 1 week after having an abortion, she surrendered to him in her very own version of the sinner's prayer, punctuated with the F word.
She was in San Francisco walking down the sidewalk hungover and drunk, and she heard gospel music out of a black Presbyterian church in San Francisco. And so the music was just wafting out of the doorway. And so she wandered in, and the people loved her into having her find her sobriety. And she's a an author that writes about how very, very real Jesus is in her life and earthy, and how it made a difference. She has a book that's called All You Need Is Three Words for Prayer: Help, Thanks, and Wow. And then she added another word, okay. So you're going through life, and you don't need a bunch of fancy prayers. You don't need a bunch of creeds. All you need is 3 or 4 words to get you through just about anything in life that happens to you. Help, help, help. And like she said, when you see a gorgeous sunset, all you can say is, wow. It's such an awesome moment. So she's one to say that, the, okay, Lord, I will look for ways. Okay, Lord, I will make you the center of my life. Okay, Lord, I will go where you send me. And so her new conversion is just to say, okay, Lord, I will look for others to tell. I will look for ways to tell others about the ways you have changed me into a new person by loving me beyond my comprehension. Okay, Lord, I'm yours. And when we say, okay, we open the door for God to use us to bring in God's kingdom. So I thought this was a great evangelism tool that we haven't heard very often before. There's some real arm twisting versions, but this one is to say, okay, Christ really made my anxiety level not near as high, or made my 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 happiness level a whole different way of looking at the world. And so, I can tell someone about, wow, I went to this concert with live music, and it was just an amazing thing my church does. And people down the street at Christmas Eve were shouting and cheering. I don't know if anybody knew that we had Christmas Eve, and people in the neighborhood were shouting and cheering when the music was done, because they were enjoying it. So this was part of this pastor sings. She said, and early Methodists would say, how is it with your soul? And then I wish Vicki were back on here. She was teaching us last year in the district that early pietist would say, how goes your walk with the Lord? Has anybody said that to you? How goes your walk with the Lord?
Well, I don't know if I had that. I mean, Kathy, you were sharing a little earlier about, it's like being put on the spot, right? Somebody cold and say that, probably not a very good thing. That's just my opinion, because my reaction would probably be, why do you want to know? But if it was somebody who I knew who said that, or, like in a group, that would be totally different. I mean, that, of course, and that's what that's talking about.
You keep bumping your computer and it keeps bumping.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that.
I remember you said one time that a college professor that you had to call up, a religion professor that you called up 25 years after you graduated, and he said, how's your walk with Jesus, Dave? I remember that made a big impression on you.
Yeah, was it a good one or a bad impression?
I don't know.
Well, it depended on the context. I mean, he was somebody I had a relationship with, and so I did not take that as, it was a little bit of a maybe odd question, but yeah, it's okay because I knew him. But if someone isn't that what we do when Jehovah's Witnesses come to our door? I mean, it could be other groups, but that's one that, I mean, I generally am not like, oh, well, I'm going to tell you. I'm probably not.
But would would it seem like somebody cared to I mean it's kind of like how is how are you really doing in COVID times instead of how are you today? It's like fine. Well, how are you really doing in COVID times? People might actually answer that question, or it might feel like someone actually cared if they talked, if you got if they listened long enough to hear the answer. I heard a friend tell me today that um, they work in uh, the high school and with children, and the the alarming rate of suicidal children in COVID has just been nobody knows how hard these kids are really struggling to put to face the computer one more day in their life, and there's no friends, there's no excitement. It's just barely making it through the day because of COVID. And I don't know that we've even heard about this in the news because it's people are private and they don't share about how horrible their kids are doing during COVID time. So this last bit, so how is it with your soul? And she says, do you think that's too hard to invite them to we tell others how God has changed our lives and invite them to consider how God might change their lives? Do you think that's too hard? Well, let me tell you how we are doing that already. This pastor in this blog, Pastor Sings, she said this week at the Brown County Fair, more than 70 families took advantage of our diaper depot and feeding station. And we can tell those people that God loves them. So that's not a hard sell, is it? Handing out diapers isn't a hard sell. Would we ever be able to answer, how has the Lord changed my life and changed me into a new person? Do we have any words for that, I wonder?
Well, I think you're right. I don't think it's fancy stuff. And maybe one of the things we could do is, during COVID, um, just be inviting folks to come to either, it could be the Bible study or the church service. And, you know, they'll never come if we never invite. I mean, I think you could say that no matter what it is. And maybe that would be not a very hard thing to do. I know, I mean, Gail and our neighbor, he's not particularly a church person, but I've been talking to him different times. And, I told him, well, I'm going to do this Mark Twain thing. And he says, oh yeah, maybe I'll go to that. So maybe that's a small way to do this.
You're going to do a Mark Twain sermon and he might join the Zoom that Sunday. That's really goes back to this relational. You wouldn't just go up to someone and say, hey, you want to see me do Mark Twain? But, I have this, you talk to your neighbor, or you talk to someone about, hey, this is kind of cool thing that we're doing. You ought to come and see, you ought to check this out. So, maybe we have some work to do during COVID. We could check in with people that we know who might need a Mark Twain in their life, or something that's encouraging, or something that helps feed their soul. we're going to talk more about that on Sundays. My sermon's going to be on Come Grow and Go is my sermon for this coming Sunday. Well, anything else we want to add?
Well, I think one other thing too is get involved with issues like you know we need to be better stewards of the earth. And I don't know how this discussion came up. One time we were flying from Paris to Milan, I think it was, or whatever, and this person was sitting beside. Turns out she had 3 doctor's degrees, and she was teaching in Paris and so on. And we had just it was kind of an interesting thing. But anyhow, it made some comment about you know anyhow just being good stewards of the earth. Well, this kind of triggered some questions in her, and she began asking questions more about being good stewards, and maybe a little bit about where did we get where'd that feeling come from. And of course then it comes an opportunity for us to say, well, be honest about we were brought up this way in terms of what God has given us, right? And so it was kind of interesting. It was just but anyhow, by getting involved and things like that, the issues that really have some consequential related issues to Christianity, and people get interested in how what then the question becomes, what makes you think the way you think? Where do you come up with this? And it gives you a chance to respond.
So it's not only me and God, but it's me and these other issues that God's put on my heart, right?
So if I had to start out trying to tell her about the Church of the Brethren, well, I probably would have fallen flat.
Right. So why do you have solar panels? Dave, you're muted. What?
That was a version of Come and See.
It's a version of Come and See. Yeah.
It is.
I just think all of the efforts need to be sincere, right?
Absolutely. Good point.
Because some people, they'll ask you the question because they think it's the right thing to do, not because they want the answer.
People pick up on insincere pretty quickly.
Right. And that's such a turnoff, especially if you're actually talking to someone who has a problem that you don't, that they're just really need to have someone listen to them. If you're not sincere when you ask, don't ask.
Right.
One of the things that kind of gets to me is when people start coming to me and I see that this is coming from some type of what shall we say, an academic point of view, like come, see, grow. I think, oh, this is kind of a formula for something, and and I don't know. So I get turned off when I see, well, of course, maybe it's because I've been through so many other different things in terms of, classes and such where they teach you how to, deal with conflict resolution or whatever it is, and there are certain steps, and you see people trying to, use this kind of step on you, kind of like, and and it's kind of comes in with behind what Kathy's saying, it seems to sometimes lack the sincerity that, somebody's just trying a formulated, scheme to
You're the next
into.
You're the next guinea pig to see it, to experience.
Right. I don't know. It's just, but that's probably my own, handicap.
Yeah. Well, I like things that I can remember, you know, things that are triggers for me that I can remember, like acronyms or things that help me think about what do you say, you know, when someone asks you, "Are you saved?" Well, you know, I can say, "Well, ask my neighbors." You know, those are nice answers that I can remember that can
Yeah.
help me think of what to say. So, so Larry, you have this green thumb that you use in your yard. Um, why do you plant all those flowers, Larry?
Not only enjoy it, but I also enjoy sharing it with others.
Yeah,
And it was interesting that we had a neighbor across the street who has since moved to Florida, but we called her Mrs. Friendly because she was not friendly at all. But it was interesting that over time she had an interest in flowers and gardening, and that's how we developed a relationship.
yeah, absolutely. And um, it can be, you know, anything in God's green earth that um, what might spark someone's curiosity, and that's our opportunity to say, "Oh, come and see. Yeah, check it out."
Yeah.
So that's our homework, I guess. I was at the hospital with Barb's mom, and one of the women came in who was serving the food, and she wanted to show us the pictures of the rat problem she had in this house she had just bought. And we're just going, oh my word. So we were just empathizing. Then you know, she had a picture of the dead rat. And it's like, you know, I always wondered, is there a sign on me that says, tell me your story? Because I'm always going to get these stories. And so, you know, we could empathize with her and just, you know, hope, just wished her good luck because she got the TV channel in Richmond, Virginia, to help solve this rat problem she has in her house. So it's like, you know, who knew that it could be rats that gets you connected with people. You never know. Well, on that note, I'll stop the video here.